Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Join Terry with Tracer Rounds every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern to hear interviews with veteran artists, veteran business owners, and businesses that support veterans. Catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and MB Radio. If you miss a show, you can listen again on Wreaths Across America Radio every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to see if you are on target. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
And welcome back to the Tracer Rounds podcast. And I'm Terry, your host, and I have a special guest with me tonight. I have Division Chief Warren Mitchell, and he is with the Denver Fire Department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you so much. Honored to be invited.
So excited to have you here. You're my first firefighter chief on the podcast, and so I'm excited to let people hear a little bit more about the fire service and about what you do. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you started in the fire service, maybe how old you were and how you decided on that career path?
Sure. So like most young men, I wanted a job in public service. I thought about police or fire. And joined the Marine Corps with one of my buddies who kind of had that option back then of jail or the Marine Corps. I wasn't in the same boat, but he talked me into it being a good idea. So I went in as an MP, thought that would give me the exposure and preparation to get hired as a cop in the civilian life. And it did one good thing for me, to make me realize I didn't want to be a cop. So I was in the Marine Corps. I started pursuing researching other options. Of course, we didn't have the internet back then, but I talked to some of the firefighters on base and realized that's what I wanted to do. Okay. I got out of the Marine Corps in 92. I thought, okay, no problem. I've taken a little bit of college. I've had, an honorable discharge. I should be able to just walk on to a fire department. And I quickly learned that they were very competitive. I did end up getting hired with Denver, but it took 12 tests over 2 years. I did some community service, social type work in between. But I remember testing for Denver, and they had 5,300 people test. They closed off 4 city blocks around Kurgan Hall. And there was all these young men that were, in great shape. With all their T-shirts from all their volunteer departments that they were working, and I thought, I'm wasting a Saturday here.
Wow.
But the first process is to take a written test. I walked out of there thinking, well, that was a neat experience. I'll continue testing at smaller departments, but then went through, a pretty lengthy process that took nearly I think it was like about 14 months before I got hired by the time I had applied. But like I said, that was one of 12 departments. It just happened to be the one that offered me a position first. So I was super grateful. I didn't get any military points. I had not served in combat. I didn't deploy, even though I was in during the first Gulf War. So it was really kind of like playing the lottery. I had to be qualified enough to get in that Olympic camp and at least have a chance at getting hired. But there's no way out of 5,300 people, they ended up hiring 36 of that year, that I was in the top 36.
Wow.
I was probably in the top, several hundred. And then I happened to be lucky enough to get an appointment out of that group of people.
That's amazing. That is a lot of people. I can't imagine a process that big. I think the largest process that I ever helped in, well, no, that wasn't even my process. It was a process before mine, was like 2,500. So I can't imagine 5,300 people. That is
Yeah.
crazy amounts of applicants. Like, it is so competitive.
And it's still competitive, but not quite as so. And I think part of it's because we've regulated how many people apply, but we're looking at about 1,200 applicants for an average of 48 positions now. That might flex a little bit each year, but still very competitive, and very qualified people don't get selected because you just cannot screen that many people and get the top people. But it's oftentimes we hire people with doctorate degrees, coming from other career fields, highly successful, taking pay cuts to start over.
Yeah.
And we get people with no experience and starting out in their life as well, but it's definitely competitive to get in.
Definitely. Do you have to have any medical certifications to apply or to be considered?
Well, Denver, like many large departments, you just have to meet the basic qualifications. So you don't have to have your EMT, you don't have to have fire experience or be certified as a firefighter, but you have to have not been in trouble, be drug free, be able to pass the high physical fitness standards, have your high school diploma or GED. But then you have to test well. You have to test well on the written. You have to test well on social emotional intelligence, and then interview well. And if you get past those stages, then that's where it's more of the pass-fail test. Are you able to pass your medical screening, and your polygraph, drug testing? And then, because of the Denver size, we train them to be EMTs and firefighters. We do not run a single system. Most fire departments now are running paramedics that are employed by the fire department.
Yeah.
City and County of Denver runs a two-tiered system. So the city hospital runs the paramedics, and we respond to medical calls and provide basic life support skills. But the advanced life support and the transport is provided by Denver Health.
Okay, so you have to be certified to an EMTB?
Correct, but
Basic.
you have to get hired, but we give you that training, and we do IVs.
Oh, okay. Wow, so that's pretty incredible, though. And so you have 39 stations, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so how many firefighters would you say that you have for those 39 stations? Because you have 3 shifts, correct?
Correct. So we're at 1,200 firefighters.
Wow.
A portion of those are at the airport, which is a separate division. And then we have, a small portion of those in support services positions.
Do you have any double companies, or are they all single company stations?
No, plenty double companies. I don't know offhand what we have, but we have quite a few trucks compared to other departments, and we have a pretty strong truck culture. So when we respond to fires, the predetermined obligations of those crews are pretty set based on what apparatus they're on. It doesn't mean the incident commander or the company officer can't deviate from that, but we're very truck centric. So our truck companies go in and they do the forcible entry and the search and the ventilation.
Do you run your own ambulances too, or does the ambulance come out of the hospitals?
So
or a separate agency?
Yeah, they're primary separate, but we did institute what we call med units that are not firefighters, but they're civil servants and young kind of entry level job, and they're taking the low acuity calls, the calls that the 911 call takers screen and realize that they're very unlikely to be life threatening. But we still need to render aid and make sure that there's not something larger going on. But because they're so low acuity, we don't want to send a fire apparatus and take them out of the response matrix for a larger emergency, whether that be a fighter or more a critical medical emergency. So we have 4 of those, and they help reduce that call load and keep the rigs in service for fires or more serious events.
That makes sense. Do you have also a community paramedicine program too?
Define community paramedicine for me. We don't use a term like that, but I'm interested in what you have.
So people that frequent hospitals because that's really their only avenue to get care. So the community paramedicine group would go out and visit those people that would be routinely going into the hospital emergency rooms because, like I said, that's really their only form of care. They don't really have the primary care. They don't really necessarily have insurance. They're more of the type that all of a sudden I'm sick. I've just got to find some help somewhere. So they go to emergency rooms, and then these community paramedicine. So they're all either a paramedic or EMTB, or even the A's. So in Texas, we have the advanced EMT. They call them, it's EMTA, or there is another word they've changed to. I'm trying to remember what it is, but so the advanced, so they're just below a paramedic. And those people will go out. They'll have a team of like 4, I think, and
Sure.
they go in a fire vehicle, but it's not like a response like it would typically go to a fire or an incident scene like that. And then they go out and visit these people in their homes, and they try to make sure they're taking their medication, and they just double check on them and make sure that everything's good with them, so that way they're not having to use the hospital as their main doctor source. They're actually getting care from those community health professionals, but they're firefighters.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those programs. We do not have that. We do have something that is meant to help mitigate some of that. And so we have mental health professionals that respond to calls where we have frequent mental health responses, or people who are abusing the system that might be because they have mental health issues, and they're able to better fast track or connect them to external resources outside the fire department so that they're not depending upon an emergency response for chronic mental health events.
That's definitely needed. I'm glad to hear that because, there's so many calls for mental health services and they end badly because no one really is properly prepared to deal with someone that's at that critical stage in their mental state. And so, they don't always end well, unfortunately. So having that resource to help mitigate some of those issues for people that are experiencing those crisis moments, that's awesome.
Yeah, both Denver Fire and Police are very appreciative of them. They have really reduced the call load, and not that I think we have any chronic issues with first responders not handling those calls well. We know that police and fire are not their focus of their training is not mental health. Right. And so when we got somebody whose primary responsibility is mental health, they're much better suited to deal with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I certainly wasn't meaning to say they couldn't respond to a mental health call, but yeah, having a professional that's well trained in that lane is definitely a bonus. It's a force multiplier for the department and for the city as a whole.
Yeah, no, and just speaking nationwide, we know that this has been a struggle, and so this is one way to help improve how we respond to the community.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So what do you do in the fire department? What's your job? What's your role?
Presently, I'm really not a firefighter anymore. I oversee safety and training. So that division is responsible for all the training of new firefighters. we deliver a 23-week academy, which includes EMT, hazmat, but then also all the basics of firefighting, getting them the training and the certification, which really I pride myself on not seeing those as separate things. We do not train our recruits to pass a test. We train them to be Denver firefighters, and we align the certification process with that. We're very fortunate to be able to have that autonomy with how we use certification within our national system with ProBoard. And then we provide incumbent training for the firefighters who are out on the street. And I say provide, we mostly facilitate that because we would love to have a larger incumbent training staff. But the first thing to go when budget is an issue is always training and wellness. So we mostly facilitate the continuing education that we need for our firefighters, and most of the training is done at the company level. And so that's what I'm doing presently. But because of budget impacts, we have done away with one division, my division, and that now is being folded under administration, which will have some opportunities, but certainly will come with an impact to have one less division with that division level leadership over them. And so I'll be going back to the streets, which for me is really nice. I'll be back with, firefighters who are doing firefighting work. I will be working 24-hour shifts. The one advantage that I don't think is underappreciated as a chief officer is you go to a lot of fires. And so as a firefighter, that's what we all want to do. As a chief, though, you get a bigger piece of the pie. You get 1/5 of the city. And so there's always something going on. And anytime a chief's called out, it's going to be a larger scale. I have 3 years left. My career plan was to create a succession plan and get a replacement and go back to the firehouse with about 2 years. So the budget impacts sped that along some. And my wife is thrilled. On a personal level, I'm happy. On a professional level, I'm concerned about the impacts on, of course, my team in the department. But we're working hard to mitigate any of those that are going to come up.
Well, so I was going to say that when I was working for a fire department, I wasn't a firefighter, but when I was working for a fire department and people would come in off shift and take 8-hour assignments, to work some kind of staff duty, they were like, how do you people get anything done? Like, you're working every day, all the hours, like how possibly do you get anything done? And I'm like, welcome to our world.
Yeah, the real world. Yeah. I mean, firefighters certainly deserve the admiration they have, but we have a very good life too. It's just such a wonderful career, and the hours are part of that.
Yeah, because most firefighters have other jobs too that they go work because they have, not a lot of downtime, but they do have some downtime, and most of them stay pretty busy, even in downtime, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's true, but less true than it used to be. When I first came on, I think that the pay was good, but it's probably not as good as it is now. And I also think that families were more nuclear, that there was less divorces and more stay-at-home spouses. It was more, still male dominated, but almost exclusively males back then. Yeah. And then I think as the generations have changed, men are taking a bigger role in parenting. Unfortunately, there is, I think, more divorces, and we get compensated well. So while there are plenty of firefighters that have second careers, I think that's less so than it used to be, at least in the Denver area.
Right. Well, we're going to go on our first break, and we're going to play Dave Bray, Star Spangled Banner, and then we'll be right back with Chief Mitchell. Hold on one second. We'll get this one queued up.
twilight lies gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket train, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land under the fray, and the home of the brave. Because we are the brave. Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight you in the name of the brave. We are the USA. For those unaware, that flag is still there. It's our future to save. It's land of the brave, the USA. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land under the fray, in the home of the
And welcome back to Tracer Rounds. And with me tonight is Division Chief Warren Mitchell. Welcome back to the platform. So I was going to ask you, we touched on it briefly, but how do you see mental health in the fire service? Do you think that we're doing enough to help with that? Or do you think we can do more? Or where do you think we're at with that in the fire service and in public service, maybe in general, or first responders
Sure.
in general?
Well, I don't know if you can ever do enough, but it's such a great question. When I first came on, I joined peer support because of my interest and some of my background. And a very seasoned lieutenant that I respected said, "Hey, you're a good kid, but this is a bunch of dumb, stuff here." And I remember walking in, and there was probably a group of 12 men, again, like you imagine, firefighters, the big mustaches, and they had just been on a very critical call that really was just a terrible death. And that was my exposure at first. I was like, wow, we got some problems here. Like it was, toughen up.
Yeah.
And then a lot of work was done by a lot of courageous firefighters and stakeholders that supported us. And nationwide, but specifically Denver, we got to a point where, hey, it's okay. If you need help, you should ask for help. If you need to see a therapist, you should ask for a therapist. I don't need a therapist. I don't need the help, but it's okay if you do. Right. But I think we're finally at a place where people will openly talk about the fact that they may see a therapist, that they may have had episodes of depression or suicidal thoughts, that they work through or are in, they're more likely to reach out to their peers. And we've always had the supportive camaraderie family environment, but the rules were a little more restrictive. And so I think nationally, we're seeing a different attitude from this generation. I think increasing diversity in the fire service, having more women has given us permission to behave differently. And then I also think, like I said, there's a lot of people who really had vulnerable leadership, who did a lot of work, bottom up and then later top down, that has changed, especially with Denver, but nationwide, and made that more accessible. Now, I think the real struggle is funding it. I think we've recognized the need for it, but it's expensive. It's hard to access no matter what profession you're in, but we know that firefighters, police officers, first responders see terrible things. Yeah. They have bad work hours. Oftentimes, it's not always mentioned, but poor leadership contributes to those stressors on top of that. And so we don't have a robust infrastructure to deal with it. We have plenty of things in place, but they're not as meaningful as they should be.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And, with first responders and even dispatch, they hear a lot, and sometimes they don't typically see a lot, but they hear a lot. They hear what's going on, and they take the calls and they write the reports, and they do all the things. And some of those are very traumatic experiences. So anybody that deals in that lane has a lot to deal with sometimes, and things you hear and you see, you can't unsee and you can't unhear. So, it's really tough to really compartmentalize that stuff. Even if you really shouldn't compartmentalize it, you really should deal with it and get it out and let it go. Because if you don't, then eventually the top blows off of that compartment, and you find yourself depressed, or you find yourself trying to cope, or you find, some avenue that maybe isn't productive for you to deal with it. So you're right. You were in the military, and in the military back in the day, no one sought any kind of mental health at all. Like, you had to be fine. Like, you were, like, you didn't even go to the doctor, especially if you were like basic training or whatever. They're like, oh, you just plain broke. You're not broke. You ain't going nowhere. Like
Yeah.
It was a problem to get seen for anything, because I remember I went to my very last day of basic training. I went to the doc because I was having problems with my knees. And they go, "Private, what week are you in?" And I said, "I graduate tomorrow." And they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll see you then." Because they weren't even going to treat me, because they thought I just wanted out of doing something. Like I was there just to like get out of some kind of training or exercise or something. And I'm like, they wouldn't even look at me till I told them that I was, graduating the next day. They're like, "Oh, okay, we'll see you."
Yeah. I in boot camp, we had a recruit that was on one of our longest march carrying gear, and he said he broke his leg, and the drill instructor said, "No, you didn't." They pushed him for another, 10 miles, and turns out he broke his leg.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, the struggle is real
Yeah.
to get medical attention when you're in training. They're like, "Oh, you're just stop."
And another complexity that and I don't want to be, an apologist for executive leadership and city elected officials, but mental health is so intertwined for everybody, but especially first responders.
Yes.
If my life is going well, my kids are doing good, I'm happy in my marriage, and I go to a call where I see a family who's been tragically killed, I can feel sad, I can talk to some people, and I can go back and eat dinner. But if I'm in the midst of divorce, if I'm struggling with some alcohol addiction, if I have teenage kids that are being crappy because teenage kids are crappy, I might not be as resilient. If I'm having professional difficulties where I'm not performing as well professionally, I'm not getting along with work employees, I don't feel like I'm getting recognized, all those things intertwine. But when we're asking taxpayer dollars to support our firefighters, I don't think we've answered very well. Well, when is marriage counseling being paid during a budget crisis, and how can we directly relate that to what we should be obligated to versus someone who's having critical incident stress symptoms. And the fact it is, they're both important, and they're both going to impact how a firefighter, a police officer, a first responder shows up. But those are difficult questions for city officials to answer when they're trying to advocate for money or delegate money that would go towards picking up the trash or keeping a rec center open.
Yeah.
You have to cut those programs so that we can ensure that we have the proper support for the fire service. They're just really hard problems to do. Everyone can see it from their perspective, but the people at the rec center certainly think they should have their doors open just as much as the firefighters think that we should be supported with adequate services. So we need to do better. And I think even most city officials recognize that, and those are hard solutions to come to.
They really are, because, rec centers impact citizens, but so do firefighters. Like if you need a response, you want firefighters to respond, but you need healthy firefighters to do the response. And, so it's like, which do you cut? Like, how do you fund one and not the other? Or how do you spread the money out? And, it's a really difficult budget decision. I really wouldn't want to be a city manager, I don't think, because you have to make some really hard calls, and, our mayors and councils, I mean, they have to make some of those decisions. So, there's impact both ways, for and against. So if you side one way and you budget one thing and then you don't budget the other, then you've got another group of people to deal with. So it's really a balancing act between the two.
And so, even though we should do better with Denver, for example, there are some really tangible things that can be done with less staffing. An adequately trained and supported peer support gives an avenue for people to reach out where they may not trust leadership, or even if they have professional services, they may not feel comfortable going to them first.
Yeah.
And so a peer support can fill that gap. I also think that the better work environment people have, the more resilient they are. So if they have leadership that really cares about them, even if they're not able to provide them with all the support they need financially, but they're well trained and they're putting the right people in the right places, then people are going to be more resilient because they feel supported at work. And then the other thing that leadership can do or help do is, for me personally, I've certainly had some dark calls, and I've had bleed over from my personal life into the performance I had as a firefighter.
Yeah.
But one thing that's always been a point of salvation for me, resilience, is the fact that we have such a wonderful job where we're getting paid to help people and we don't charge them anything.
Right.
And so it's really easy to feel fulfilled for me when I know that my job has such an impact directly on people. Now, that can be lost through burnout. When we respond on lots of low acuity calls, we've had such a drastic increase in people without homes, people with mental health that aren't getting the right services. And it's not that fire and first responders don't want to help them, but they're trained to, kick in doors and chase the bad guys. And that can take a toll on serving that population without the proper support over and over again. And so they may lose that connection of that value because they're getting burnt out with those type of calls, and with struggles in leadership and struggles with sleep, and then their personal lives compounding that.
Yeah, because some of the busy stations, they barely get time to get into the station and reset when they've got another call out. So, some of those busier stations, those people, if they don't rotate those personnel every so often to another station that may be not quite as busy, those individuals that are in those stations can be burned out pretty quickly, I would think, because like you said, lack of sleep, lack of ability to have a little bit of downtime to reset and to, refocus or shift focus, or maybe, bring down the adrenaline a little bit. That does make it tough.
Yeah. And for the listeners that don't know, Firefighters are much busier than you would imagine because 70-80% of their calls are non-fire related. They're medical in nature, hazmat, accidents, electrical issues. And so a typical Denver crew will go on probably an average of 15 runs in a 24-hour shift on top of inspections, training, physical fitness standards, and then, the social aspects of purchasing food, cooking, eating together. So there are very few places now where old firefighters can go and sit in a recliner. They are working when they're on shift.
Yeah, I've had citizens before say, "Well, they don't do much. They just sleep in the firehouse. How do we pay them to sleep overnight in the firehouse? Like, why is that? Why do we let them do that?" And I'm like, "Do you understand what they do in a day? And do you understand that they're on call and they're waiting for a call from you to show up at your door? They're there, they're ready. If they had to go home and go to sleep and then try to report to like a volunteer station does, and you've got maybe even a 20-minute response on the volunteer station, depending upon how far the volunteers live from the station. I mean, I think there's a miscommunication and a misunderstanding from some people. I think more people get it now, but when I heard that comment, I was like, oh my goodness, there needs to be some education.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
I was really shocked at that. I was like, my goodness. Okay, so we're gonna definitely have to educate the public on what it means to be a firefighter. So when I was doing the recruiting, I always, because they were like, oh, this is what I want to do. But they were, not doing very well on the rosters, not getting very far up on the eligibility lists. And they were like, well, how do I make a difference? How do I get into the service? So my go-to for them always was, well, go be a volunteer firefighter. Try it on for size. See if it's for you. You'll know very quickly whether you want to do that or not, because if you're willing to do it for free and you enjoy it, then that's your career path. That's what you want to do, and that's where you should be. But if you get there and you're having to respond and you're like, I don't want to do this, then you know that you don't want to continue in this process, and you don't want to continue to try to chase this if that's not really what you want at the end of the day. And I said, beside the fact that if you do go to volunteering at one of those local counties or smaller cities, whatever the case may be, that looks good on your resume to say, I've been a volunteer firefighter. I've, seen this type of call. I've seen that type of call. We've had this training and that training. I said, so it bodes well for you if you try to engage with those for a lot of reasons, one being whether this job is a fit for you.
No, I agree. I see a lot of volunteer firefighters, and I think having some cultural competency on what is required is important. Although it's such a good job, there's so many people who happen to get it from another career field. Firefighters don't get on the job and quit. They don't go, oh, this sucks.
Right.
But I do see people who may not be prepared for the academy. So it's helpful to have that cultural competency so you can have someone help you prepare, understand what all the studying and the physical fitness standards are, so that you don't get washed out of the academy. And even people who don't get washed out, it's a stressful experience.
Yeah.
So the more prepared you are, the better. But another thing I like to tell young men and women who are applying, especially because it's so competitive, is we have lots of volunteer firefighters who are interested. And while that certainly helps build their resume, we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
If you have somebody who has a diversity of showing community service, that also catches their attention because it shows a level of potential community connection that will protect against burnout. If you have somebody who is involved in the community with already working with mental health, homeless, addiction issues, any city service that might be not directly aligned with a firefighter, well, then when they go through the process, they're going to stand out because they're going to say, well, here's someone who doesn't want to just, kick ass and take names. here's someone who really wants to serve the community because they're doing some of the other less glamorous work.
Yeah.
And like I said, once you get on the job, everyone loves it. Doesn't matter where you're from. It's just such a wonderful job.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't really met any firefighters that weren't happy doing what they're doing. I mean, they were very satisfied in their careers, and only as they were nearing retirement did they look to other things to do. Like teaching at a college, a community college, teaching fire classes, or volunteering at another volunteer station so they could be a chief or something because they already knew firefighting and could train others. So that's what most of them that retired did, that as far as I know. They just moved
Yeah.
on to other training opportunities, other public service, basically.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to say the only unhappy firefighters you saw are the ones at the end of their career, which
Oh,
I think,
no. They were happy too.
well, and I've seen that, but I think it's not that they're unhappy with the fire service. I think you almost have to create some tension to leave a marriage. If you're leaving the fire service and you love it, it's really hard. If you're still happy with everything, you're able to see the honeymoon phase is long gone. So you're able to see some of the critical things as you're leaving. And I think it helps wire our brains in a way that it makes it a little bit easier to leave a family that you've had for 3 decades for most firefighters.
Yeah, it's the same with military service. When you leave that, you have a community and you have a family and you have, a um, shared passion, I guess I would say, for what you're
Sure.
doing. And so when you have to leave that, you're like, oh, now what do I do? Like you feel lost. So I had one captain tell me, he said, make sure that your focus and your all your outside hobbies don't involve the fire service. And he was telling that to his firefighters. Obviously
Sure.
for me it'd be a little bit different, but he was saying, don't make all your friends fire friends, make some other friends, because once you leave the job, you'll need these other hobbies and these other friends to get you through. Because if you're only focusing on your fire friends, then, once they're still on the job and you're not, there's going to be a disconnect. So make sure that you're kind of diversified in your friendships and in what you do or you enjoy doing. So that way you don't miss the fire service so much when it's your turn to retire.
Well, the fire service is so wonderful. And I do consider, my brothers and sisters in the fire service family, and I'm certainly going to keep connected with them. But, we become firefighters. It becomes our identity.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a job. And so whether it's through those relationships and the diversity of that, or any other way of looking at life, to realize that you're more than a firefighter, that you're not losing yourself when you retire, that very few people really care that I'm a division chief. But if I retire feeling like I'm still the boss and I deserve some type of credibility because of that, well, that's going to be really sad for me. So it's important that you have a way to be able to recognize your self-worth and the other wonderful things in life besides the beautiful role that we have as first responders.
I agree with that. Yeah. And military is a lot the same way. If you're a colonel, or maybe you're a sergeant major or something like that, and you're used to commanding troops and people are used to looking up to you, or you expect them to look up to you or expect them to listen to you. And then you get out to your family and other friends and you're like, okay, we'll go do this. And they're like, nah, I ain't doing that. And you're like what just happened? Everybody listens to me. So yeah, that is a big shift and a big change, certainly.
And just some self, efficacy. I mean, right now, I really have been privileged to be part of decisions and teams that have made a big impact on the city. And, in 3 years, I might be working at Walmart, greeting people as they come through. So I need to make sure that I'm just not tied to the job and find the value in other ways. And obviously, life is so beautiful and so many other things. But I think a lot of my friends who have retired really struggled and were sad in the beginning. But after they were able to free themselves and renew some of the relationships and other things that they had in life, then they all love retirement is equally as much as they did the fire service.
Well, and then they usually have, the get-togethers, with the annual retirement banquets and things like that, and you get a chance to regroup and revisit those old friendships and those old, stories and everything from the firehouse. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, maybe you can tell us some firehouse stories that aren't too sensitive that nobody will be mad about if you tell us. So I think we're going to play "Better Off Alive" by Die Tired.
Restless heart, broken from the start, and you think that you must walk this path alone. Break away and love yourself today. You have to fight the bad thoughts in your mind, 'cause you will find your better off alive. Don't give your life away. You, my friend, you're worth it in the end. Don't give it all away. Restless minds, pacing all the time, giving in to someone's point of view. And over time, when you step back from that line, you see you're not alone, and we're all afraid. 'Cause you will find your better off alive. Don't give your life away. You, my friend, you're worth it in the end. Don't give it all away. And you will find your better off alive. Don't give your life away. And you, my friend, you're worth it in the end. Don't give it all away.
Love you, Daddy.
Love you too, girls.
Good night.
And welcome back to the podcast, Tracer Rounds on Military Broadcast Radio, where we're giving veterans and first responders a voice. And so tonight's voice is to Division Chief Warren Mitchell, and we've been talking about his service in the Denver Fire Department, and we talked a little bit about your Marine time too. How long did you serve in the Marines?
4 years.
4 years. And you said you were during the Gulf War era?
The first Gulf War, I was stationed in Kaneohe, Hawaii, though, the entire time, so I did not go over.
That was a nice assignment, though, right?
It sure was, and it was more of a blessing than I realized. Because I was young, I felt like I wanted to deploy. It was towards the end of my service, and so I went in and talked to the career planner and asked if I could change my MOS to infantry. And they drafted up the paperwork, and it was going to require another 4-year enlistment. I said, I don't want to go over that bad. So I was thankful. You don't get to just pick your assignment in the Marine Corps, as you know, but I was thankful that that it required that much of a commitment, because I wasn't willing to do that. I was willing to go over there and risk my life because I didn't really realize what that meant at that age.
Yeah.
But I wasn't willing to give 4 more years of service. So
Understood. That makes sense. So do you want to tell us maybe some interesting stories of the firehouse? So let me ask you this. Do any
sure,
of your stations still have poles in them?
they do. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. We have a handful. So, and yeah, it's a nice piece of history. I don't know how often they get used now, but yeah, we do. And I can't do it justice. There's so many wonderful, funny stories in the fire service. I often talk about, to the recruit classes, how, the job's going to make you cry, but also it's going to bring tears to your eyes, just how funny how hard you're going to laugh. And that there are so many moments where I just belly laughed in my career. They probably were less and less as you get higher in rank, which you're not able to do some of the things you shouldn't do,
Right. Right.
But so I've always thought if there was no consequence, I could write a book and it would really be a great seller, but it would be other people's stories and stories that you couldn't publicly share.
Right.
But I'll share a few, stories that are self-depreciating that I experienced. I went through, I wouldn't say a phase, but I spent a lot of years studying Spanish. I really enjoyed speaking Spanish when I was delivering services. I was in a part of Denver that had the highest concentration of immigrants anywhere in the state. That's kind of where they would first go and get temporary housing as they came through. And so it was really fun, especially with my red hair, to speak Spanish on calls. And I think it might have been when I was going through a divorce, and we met a patient who I judged to be Hispanic, and I was speaking Spanish, and he was looking confused, and I was speaking louder, and I was speaking faster, and my crew was kind of tiptoeing around me because I was easily aggravated because of my personal life, and they finally said, "Hey, Cap, we think he's from Iraq." So I felt a little silly. I had to check my ego a little bit. My Spanish wasn't that good to start with, so I thought maybe I just wasn't getting my point across. But I had a built-in bias already that someone who had brown skin in my neighborhood was Spanish, and they were not. So
Yeah, that happens in Miami. If you go into a store, they don't know what language you speak, so they just start with one and hope it's the right one.
I should have had a little more insight and patience, but and then, there was another time when I was working in central Denver. We were responding to a fire alarm, and fire alarms in high rises, 98% of the time are set off by some type of malfunction with the system, someone smoking, steam out of the shower. They're false alarms.
Yeah.
But we don't respond to that. At least we try not to respond to those alarms as false alarms, because we want to be in a state of readiness and not complacency. So we're bringing in the gear. We're thinking about what the potential problem can be, what the impacts of the fire on the building will be, what the problems are with evacuation, et cetera. And so as occupants are coming down in the elevator, someone says, "Oh, is this a fire?" And I said, "Well, it could be. You need to evacuate." And I was being condescending, I think. Again, one of those moments where I wasn't my best self. And I was acting like, we were there to save the day. We had all our gear on, had my fire helmet on. And as I was talking to the citizens, I kept walking into the elevator, and the door was shut on me just as I walked into it. And so I looked like a fool, and my crew really got a kick out of it, because I'm normally not rude to the public, but I was at that point, and I looked like what I was at the moment, a jackass, where I was being self-important and walked right into the elevator door.
Oh no. Oh goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just recently, as recently as July, we had a skydiving event, and you brought some firefighters from Denver Fire to the skydiving event, and then you came out too, and you're a skydiver as well, right?
I am, yes.
And didn't you jump with them too that day?
I did. So they were all in tandem, and I got to go up on the same plane load and jump with them as a fun jumper.
And so can you tell us a little bit about those firefighters and why you selected them to come on the MBR Freedom Jump?
Sure. And it was so generous for you guys to do that. Skydiving isn't cheap, but more than the money, it gave them an opportunity to do something that I think people always say they want to do, but they really need an invite and some encouragement. And, by the time it had reached me, we were coming kind of close to a deadline, and I had lots of well-deserving firefighters. It turns out it was kind of hard to give away a free skydive. I had to make quite a few phone calls to people that I thought were well-deserving. And so one young firefighter had been on the job for less than 2 years. One of her first significant fires looked like a room and contents fire in a normal house, but it was lightweight wood frame construction. So something that's built 1990 or later. This particular home, I think, was built probably in the last 10 years. It started in the basement, and this young crew did not catch that it caught in the basement, and the floor was intact. And so they pulled a front line through the front door, but the floor was burnt out underneath. And so they got about 6 feet in, and her partner fell into literally a burning inferno in the basement.
Oh my goodness.
The training saved their lives, though.
Yeah.
She held onto the nozzle. Her mask was knocked from her face. She quickly redonned it. So you can imagine, if you're not a firefighter, being like a scuba diver and having the water rush into your face, and you have to have enough wits about you to put that on there. I mean, she had taken some breaths of smoke, but she was able to turn on that nozzle and push the fire away, not extinguish everything, but keep them safe. And the firefighter behind her had a couple more years of experience, or maybe just one more. Same thing happened to him. And then we had firefighters who, and then she called for a mayday. So a mayday means, hey, I need help, we're in trouble. She correctly called, gave it the circumstances of what that was. Immediately, they sent crews to help them. A firefighter found a basement window. He jumped in there, shined his light. They recognized it, the light that was able to grab their attention, and then they navigated to that window, and with some help with the other firefighters, were able to extricate. But
That's amazing.
yes, and she's an amazing firefighter, but she's junior. She's a woman. She's got 2 years on, and that is a daunting experience for any of us. And
For sure.
without her to speak on her lived experience of it, I thought, here's someone who could really use an uplifting experience that will help them regain some confidence, and help her with, she came out to training. She did some training where she healed her injuries, but then that just helped give her that little bit of extra confidence to go back into the 24-hour shifts, because she has to anticipate that she could go on an identical fire within a half an hour of showing up on her first shift.
True.
And so that was a very nice gift that you guys gave for her. The other firefighter was an instructor at the academy. Because we have such a great job, it is tough to get people to want to come out and work in the academy at times. We attract the very best and the most committed, but that's because they're not working 24-hour shifts. They're not hanging out with their friends. They're not doing hero work, at least not traditional hero work. They're running recruits over the same instruction again and again in the hot sun or in the cold winter. And they're working extra hours to help recruits who might have gaps. And it doesn't come with any extra pay, no accolades. So we had a firefighter who was doing that. And so she was well deserving. And then we just had another chief that was a lifelong dedicated firefighter who's done just so much work for the fire service. And so it was a chance to show some recognition to him.
That is super awesome that you were able to get those firefighters to jump with our group. That I don't know how you did it all at the last minute. Like I said, we gave you a very short suspense. And so we really appreciate you pulling all that together so that we could have this jump. And so that's another reason why I wanted to have you on, because I really appreciate what you did for us. And I wanted to thank you for that, because that was no small feat, in my opinion.
Well, it was a gift for us, and everyone appreciated it. And every time I see them, they bring it up.
Well, that's awesome. Is there any parting words you want to say before we get off the air? We're right at our time, but the floor is yours if there's anything else you'd like to say before we end for the night.
No, I've really enjoyed my time. I enjoy what you do for veterans and for first responders, and I've been honored to spend the evening with you. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. So this was Division Chief Warren Mitchell with the Denver Fire Department, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Terry.
Tracer Round signing off.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.